My name is Holly Jamison Carr. I'm with the United States Department of Energy. I am acting director of the Solar Decathlon at DOE, which is a student competition for designing and building zero-energy homes and commercial buildings. And I'm going to jump right in and introduce the rest of our panel.
Hit the button.
Hit the... Oh, how about some names? We'll give you a visual here. There we go. So to my immediate left is Bakari Kennedy. He is the Director of Facilities at Suncoast Credit Union and also an esteemed Better Buildings partner. Bakari is going to be telling us about the zero energy really portfolio that is developing at Suncoast in Florida. The title of our presentation here is Approaching Zero Energy, but you'll see that that is a bit of a humble title for Bakari and Suncoast because they are there and really moving towards new zero energy facilities all the time. Next up will be Susan Long, hailing from one of my very favorite retail locations, Recreational Equipment Incorporated, REI, coming to us from Seattle. Bakari is coming from Tampa, Florida, by the way. Susan is the Sustainability Initiatives Manager at REI, where we have small little bank branches, although you'll hear about some larger facilities also at Suncoast. Susan's really going to be focusing on the doing zero big theme with a very large facility that REI recently built and started operating in Arizona. And last but not least, Shanti Pless with the National Renewable Energy Lab, coming to us from Colorado, from Golden, Colorado. And Shanti's going to be talking about a lot of the resources that NREL and DOE are putting out there really to help practitioners get this done in their own portfolios. So that's the plan for this morning. And I'm going to skip through the learning objectives. We'd like to know a little bit about how you are connected with zero energy buildings and who you are. Hopefully you're a bit familiar with this texting in the answers situation, so we're going to add a little challenge to it this morning. We're going to do 2 polls at one time. So while you are texting in your responses of how you are connected to zero energy buildings, whether you're in the learning mode, you're finding out about the concepts and practices of zero energy buildings, whether you are part of an organization or a jurisdiction with some sort of zero energy mandate or goal, whether you are someone who has constructed or is currently working on the design of a zero energy building, or what we really want to see out in the world, folks who are living and working in zero energy buildings. So please type in your responses to that, while I also at the same time ask you to tell me who you are. So can the designers, architects and designers out there, raise your hands for us? Construction folks, okay, owners, consultants, government folks. Okay, any other people who want to shout out who they are that I missed? All right, thank you. And we've got, from our poll, we've got a lot of folks here learning about the concepts, learning how to do this, which is great. A few people with mandates. Living and working in zero energy buildings. Can those folks raise their hands? Who's living or working in a zero energy building? One of our panelists is not raising his hand.
Okay.
2 of our panelists are not raising their hands. Yeah. Okay. Great. Year after year, right, at Greenbuild, this is what we want to see, more and more people raising their hands that they're actually in a zero energy building. So that's our goal. So I'll start us off with a little bit of an overview. Those of you who have been at Greenbuild for the past couple of days probably know a lot of this stuff because miraculously we have had 2 tracks at this conference this week that have been focused on zero energy, which is a real testament to where this is headed and the excitement around zero energy and the practice of zero energy. So I've got to throw this in here. I personally have seen this in at least one other presentation, and this is the zero energy building definition from DOE, and we put a lot of time and effort and funding into trying to do this work and kind of setting the ground rules for folks so that you don't have to do this over and over again and decide what is a zero energy building or a zero energy community. So this is the delivered energy to the building is less than the on-site renewable exported energy on an annual basis. And of course, just setting the foundation here, I sit in the energy efficiency part of energy efficiency and renewables at DOE. So this is near and dear to my heart, just keeping that efficiency as high as possible, keeping that EUI down and making that the primary focus of our buildings before we do the renewables work. It's certainly a perfect storm for zero energy. Right now, you can see the graph on the left here is showing us that our EUI, our energy intensity, is going steadily down in commercial buildings in the United States. Meanwhile, the cost of panels is just plummeting, although we did hear in the previous session, if y'all were here at 8 o'clock this morning, that the price has gone up a little bit recently because of the tariffs, but have this steadily decreasing panel price and therefore the resulting dramatic increase in solar installations. This reminds me of graphs that we saw 12 years ago or so at Green Build conferences when we were talking about LEED certifications. And now we're looking at the same kinds of numbers, hundreds year over year of zero energy buildings coming onto the market. And the buildings are, California is really leading the charge here with the number of zero energy buildings. And let me scoot back here one slide if I can. And the education sector is also leading the way with K-12 schools, and Shanti's going to speak a little bit about that as well. And certainly the interest is there. We're seeing that at this conference, and we're hearing that from the market. 80% of 1,200 respondents surveyed recently stated that they are planning a zero energy building in their portfolio. That's up from 29% just 5 years ago. So a lot more interest, a lot more awareness of what's out there. And we are seeing those costs come down. Again, akin to LEED certification, we're seeing a workforce that is more familiar with these concepts. More and more folks know how to do this. And we have stricter energy codes that are kind of putting that energy efficiency foundation in there as a law. And then we can move to renewables. So just a lot of beautiful factors coming together to make this the right time for zero energy. And luckily, we're also seeing really nice trends in occupancy rates, higher rental rates and rental values, and higher sale values for these zero energy buildings. So there's money behind it as well. So we're going to be breaking the rest of this session down into doing zero small, looking at bank branches. You're going to see there's more to what Suncoast is doing than just bank branches. And then we'll have a piece on doing zero big with distribution centers, fulfillment centers, and then doing zero right with Shanti. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Bakari, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Holly. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out this morning. I'm very excited to be here at Green Build. This is my first Green Build, and I'm happy to represent Tampa, Florida. Is there anyone else here from the Tampa Bay area or Florida? Okay, we have a few other souls that braved this cold weather. Again, thank you for coming out. So weather is a huge factor for us when we're designing net zero buildings. Florida's hot, humid climate, the requirements for air conditioning and humidity control is a big player in our energy use. And today I just want to go over some of the strategies that we're using for small branches, medium-sized buildings, and even some of our larger buildings. So Suncoast Credit Union is the largest credit union in Florida. I am the director of facilities for Suncoast, so that pretty much means I manage a lot of our buildings, and also I'm part of the building team for the construction of our new buildings. And when we first started looking at what we call our green buildings, these are buildings that have 100% LED lights, buildings that have low E windows, geothermal heat pumps. The goal was to make sure that we're building buildings that are better for our overall environment. And we started with small 4,000 square foot branches in places like Bushnell, Florida. So here in Bushnell, Florida, this was the first solar building that the community had ever seen. Bushnell Utilities, the local co-op, had no other solar installations. So net metering, bidirectional meters, these were all new to this community. But since that time, since 2013, we've gone ahead and built over 13 additional solar-powered branches throughout Florida. And we've seen the cost of the overall solar to go down quite a bit. So in 2013, we were looking at $2.50 per watt. 2017, we're now down to $1.80 per watt. So for a typical 4,000 square foot branch, the cost would somewhere in 2013 was over $100,000. Now we're down to around $70,000, $80,000. And what that means for us is that the payback is somewhere around 11 years on a 4,000 square foot branch. One thing that's very attractive to us when we're installing solar is that our members, the local community, they may not understand the LED lights a whole bunch. They may not see the geothermal heat pumps, but what they do recognize is the solar. And getting that message out about sustainability, about renewables is very important to Suncoast. We want it to be part of the vocabulary, really, of our communities. Part of the overall conversation when people are driving down the road. What is that, and what is that for? Those are our solar panels, and they help us make our buildings net zero. So today, we have about 13 different solar power branches. 6 of those are net zero buildings. So throughout the year, we are producing more electricity and providing it back into the grid than we are receiving. And this is throughout Florida. And Suncoast has recently been allowed to branch out throughout the entire state. So we have huge plans going for the next 5 years to put buildings throughout the rest of Florida. And what this means for us on our electric bills, a typical building of this size is somewhere around $1,500 to, say, $2,200 a month. When we have our net zero buildings, we're looking at only really the cost of the commercial charge, $11 per month. So here's a 4,000 square foot building where the electric bill is $11 per month. And these are other examples of buildings that we have. Again, the cost, $22 per month. That return on investment, somewhere around 11 years, which is really, for the paper, a great investment for our company. So we started off with 4,000 square foot branches and really started looking at, okay, let's do things even bigger. And we began designing, in this case, a Fort Myers service center that is a 10,000 square foot service center and a 7,000 square foot training center. And we wanted to make use of that entire facility. So here's an example of a retention pond on site. We couldn't park on it. It's simply used for our storm runoff. And with a variance from our local water management, we were able to then install solar on the retention pond. So there are locations throughout Florida, throughout even your own communities, where there's a great opportunity, if there isn't enough roof space, to put fill mount systems. So again, we're making use of the rooftop, the drive-throughs, the fill mounts. And so this overall campus of 17,000 square feet is also one of our net zero buildings. And what we really love is that when you look at a net zero building, when you walk into our net zero building, it's cool, it's brightly lit, it has all the equipment that is standard for one of our branches. And these are very, very busy buildings. You can imagine a lobby full of people on a Friday, all coming through, all the transactions, the doors are always open, and this is still a net zero building. So in this case, again, you see 0 kilowatt hours per month on the utility bill. You will see a charge somewhere around $271 for our demand, okay? But again, we're overproducing enough that we're getting an overall credit for this building. So reducing that demand charge, which is sometimes a third of my electric bills, is very important to me. So I'm looking at and investigating battery storage. and how I can use battery storage to help reduce that demand. Overall, we've reduced our electric bills on our branches somewhere around 10 to 15% just over the past few years. And this is the total usage of our electricity with adding about 5 branches a year. So 4,000 square foot branches, 10,000 square foot branches. Now we're looking at a 30,000 square foot call center right in Tampa Bay, Florida. And this system is a 400 kW solar array. This was an existing building. So this was a challenge because a lot of the sustainability initiatives that we have at our branch, the low E windows, the insulation, the geothermal heat pumps, were not applied to this building when it was built in 2005. So this solar array reduces the overall energy use by about 70%, saving me about $70,000 a year. A metal seam roof. So this was a building built in 2005 with a standing seam metal seam roof. One of the best applications for us because with a standing seam metal seam roof, we don't have to penetrate that roof. So the chances for leaks from storms becomes very, very limited. And when you speak about storms, we're in an environment where we have hurricanes every year. And when Hurricane Irma came through, with our 13 different branches, 15 buildings overall with solar, not a single solar panel was lost on a single branch. That's all just smart installation. Now, there were some other projects throughout Florida that were hit pretty hard, but it's all about smart guys doing the right thing and making the choices on how they're clamping down those panels. Again, a 400 kW solar array saves us about $70,000 a year. Now, so that building was not a net zero building, but again, my goal is to start looking at battery storage, the Tesla power walls, and seeing how we can incorporate those to help reduce that demand. And another big part of what we do is really, again, showcasing to our members and to our employees sustainability initiatives. So this was the second floor parking garage where the inverters for the solar array were installed. And initially, we were thinking about a design of Star Wars figurines for these so that kids could come up and take a look, but our marketing department got involved and they said there were some copyright issues, so we didn't do that. But what we did do is wrap that entire space. For a very small cost, I think it was probably less than $15,000, we were able to wrap this entire space. We mounted one of the actual solar panels, and we bring kids from local elementary schools, we bring students from USF and other colleges, we bring students from tech schools, just to give them a chance to get a feel and to get excited about solar. But we wanted to improve and do even better. 4,000 square foot branches, 10,000 square foot branches, 30,000 square foot call centers. Well, we recently opened up our new 108,000 square foot new administration building in Tampa Bay. And we wanted to focus on a lot of the initiatives that we look at when we look at LEED, WELL, and Living Building Challenge, low VOCs, 100% LED lighting, a lot of daylighting, floor-to-ceiling windows to help our employees be more productive. The floors in this building actually have recycled glass in the terrazzo. Again, low E windows. It's just amazing to walk around this building and you don't feel the heat on a 90-degree day on the inside of the building on the other side of that window. And we wanted to make use of a lot of the trees that were cut down, during the construction of this project, and we reused those trees. We made sure that our AC equipment were, trained stealth, high-efficiency chillers. And of course, we covered the entire rooftop with monocrystalline solar panels. Another 400 kW system, the 5th and 6th largest solar arrays in Tampa Bay. And really for Florida, that's a real shame. I mean, 400 kW should be pretty much standard on a lot of these commercial buildings. Be it metal seam roof, PVC, TPO, the opportunities are there. So this building, we're just now getting in our first electric bills. Not sure how close to net zero it will be, but I'm already looking at a budget to perhaps put, again, field mount systems in 2 ponds out front to make sure that we're, definitely net zero. Again, for Suncoast, sustainability, Green initiatives are a big part of what we do. We are building buildings that are smart for our local communities. And we also want to showcase to all of our members, especially our commercial members, that your own buildings, be it a church, be it an auto mechanic shop, a Wendy's franchise owner, this is something that you can do to make your building better and more profitable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bakari. Could you speak really quickly to the incentive issue that we talked about yesterday?
So as a credit union, we are not eligible for the 30% tax rebates that are now available until about, I believe, 2019. And we still find that doing solar, that these initiatives are just smart business sense. So there's a great advantage for other commercial businesses to take advantage of the 30% tax rebate. $100,000 system, when they apply for the 2019 taxes, they're getting 30% off or $30,000 off on those taxes. So I really hope more businesses take advantage of it. Don't let those type of rebate programs expire. Thank you.
So Susan, we're going to head over to you next to tell us about the zero energy or approaching zero energy distribution center in Goodyear, Arizona.
All right.
I'm going to let you control that too.
All right. And this is just forward. Great. So thank you. Again, I'm Susan Long. I'm the Sustainability Initiative Manager with REI. And I'm here to talk about our distribution center. It's outside of Phoenix, Goodyear, Arizona. And it is big. It's about 400,000 square feet. And I want to talk about how we approached the design of this project and thought about getting the approvals and getting this moving as we define the need for this DC. Just before I start, I want to talk about REI a little bit. I don't know if, how many folks here are members? Yeah, nice, wonderful. REI is one of the largest outdoor retailers in the US. We started in 1938 with 23 climbing friends that wanted to get better equipment. They weren't able to get equipment to get outside. And REI's belief is that a life outdoors is a life well lived. And since then, since the formation, we've been outfitting our members to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. And our work in this space around sustainability of our buildings and our operations is in support of that, because we have to lower our impact in order to have an outdoors for our members to go out and enjoy. So let's see. Got a little bit of disconnect between notes and slides, so I'm just going to use my notes. So in 2012, we recognized the need to expand our distribution network for efficiency of delivery to members and efficiency of the network, and started thinking about where we were going to build that third DC. Southwest was where it would make the most sense. And we thought about, as a sustainability team, we thought, well, what can we do to ensure that we design in the most sustainable aspects to this building? We were in a good place because our second DC in Pennsylvania, it was actually one of the first of that building type to get a LEED certification. It's a LEED Silver building. It's in Bedford, Pennsylvania. So the co-op was familiar with the concept of sustainable building. It was kind of in our DNA of how we build our stores and other facilities. And we wanted to really be aggressive about this facility. It's a fantastic opportunity to do this right. So we engaged in an Environmental Defense Fund fellow, which is a wonderful program. If you are not familiar with it, make yourself familiar with it. Look at opportunities to use these folks because they're really smart and they do great work. We engaged a fellow to look at how we could design this building in this Southwest environment. So she took the performance data from our other two DCs, which provided a really good model of kind of what was going on inside, and then applied how would the exterior, the dry heat, affect the building performance. And the good news was that she determined that this would be certainly LEED and a net zero design would be achievable and cost effective for this new building. So that was really exciting. And that's even against some of the things that we were going to do inside the building around a lot of automation to really make the work process efficient and pleasant and easy for the people that we had in the building. And we also wanted to make sure that we were designing this building to be really comfortable place to work. Again, having to be really mindful, this is really challenging in this hot, dry environment. So this was all really good news that the design indicated we could do this. The other piece of it is certainly we were focusing on energy, but we also really wanted to be mindful of water because of overall global situation with water, but also just specifically in the Southwest, that's a really big issue. And so we wanted to be really mindful that we were designing in water efficiency. And we came up with some fairly innovative aspects to the design that I'll talk about in a little bit. So to start the process, what we did is we chose to do an integrated design process because at this point we had about 13 months to design and build this building and get it operating. So what we did is we pulled all of the stakeholders together into a design charrette so we could brainstorm all the different ways that we could design in net zero, achieve LEED, and achieve our goals with water. We had our, obviously we had our architects, we had LEED, consultants, we had net zero consultants, a number of external experts. But that was really critical was, first of all, getting the commitment from our leadership that these were the design criteria we were going to pursue. And then second of all, to get everyone together so that we could pursue sort of an in parallel design of both the systems that we were going to put into the building as well as the different aspects necessary to achieve our goals. So, and the goals were, of course, to achieve net zero. And really, one of the important things about buildings like this is to really consider the long-term total cost of ownership and make sure everyone understands that that's really where the real benefits start to really show up. And just make sure that everyone's working in parallel so as design changes happen in one place, they can be accommodated in others. So just a little preview of what we came up with. This is the building with the 2.2 megawatt array. Some things that we noticed as we were designing this, we had to pay careful attention to things like building orientation. So the south wall, which is where the most heat hits the building, is almost door-free, and all of the entryways are on the north side of the building to minimize the heat intake. And then we also wanted to make really good use of the roof to have space for the array, but also to have the skylights in the right places so that they were eliminating the work inside. So in the charrette, we came up with 57 different ideas. Again, I talked about making sure we were mindful about how we put the building on the site. Consideration of insulation, how the envelope was going to be constructed, obviously all LED lighting from the get-go, and we did things. This is a big 400 square foot building, so we used things like air turnover to move the air so that you would have efficient cooling of the building rather than cold air in one place and warm air up above, and really mindful about understanding the equipment that we were putting in and what impacts that would have on the energy consumption. By doing all of those things, we also found that we were able to downsize what was the original proposed size of the array. But bearing in mind that it is really difficult to model a building like this where you have pretty variable and somewhat unpredictable activity in the building. You have seasonality, ups and downs, and there could be the higher activity during a sale, et cetera. So it is really tricky to model a DC versus an office space where you more or less know who's going to be there and when. Let me back up. And then out of that project, back up.
There you go.
So before I go on to the water, which is really interesting, out of that project, we did come up with some ideas that we didn't use. We had really innovative ideas like, could we run directly off of the solar in a microgrid, a DC microgrid? Could we pre-cool the air that we were using for cooling through earth tubes? So some of those things, they're great ideas. At the time, it just wasn't quite a fit to the economics and the design of the building, but those are things that are probably a lot more practical now and are probably being considered or implemented in buildings today. So again, there were...
Could you speak a little bit to the hyperchairs?
Hyperchairs.
Love the hyperchairs.
Okay, so that was an innovation that we did put in. In our office area, we were attempting to set one of the most important things is that we control our HVAC. And we want the building set point to be a little warmer, about 72. So that might be a little warm for some people. And to try to give everyone their own little microclimate, we have chairs they're called hyperchairs in the office areas that have their own fan systems. They're mesh back, so there's good circulation, and they have a fan, so you can have your own little personal paradise in your chair. So it's sort of a fun thing that you see when you go into the offices. So again, we had a lot of great ideas out of this charrette. Highly recommend this kind of approach to your project. Bring everyone in and really brainstorm. And we brought a lot of the ideas through to the end design. What I wanted to talk about a little bit here was how we knew that we needed to consider water. And while DCs are not big water users, one thing that we did right away was we are using non-evaporative cooling in the DC. So it's not HVAC in the main floor. Obviously, there's air movement and non-evaporative cooling of the air that we're feeding in. And that saves over enough water for 20 homes in a year. But we knew we needed to go farther. So what we did was we partnered with the Bonneville Foundation and the Nature Conservancy to fund water restoration certificates that provide restoration of the Verde River water for recreation, by the way. So it's really a great tie-in with our function as an outdoor retailer, as we're helping people in that area get out to recreate on the waterways. And we're also helping to be more efficient in the region on the watershed with irrigation water use. There's a lot of innovation in that area with the farmers and how they use their water. And what happened was this actually has become a LEED credit. It was an innovative new approach at the time, but now it's become a LEED credit for using water restoration credits for your building. So that was really exciting, and we continue to see great results from our work with the groups in that area on our water. So again, that's kind of how we did Net Zero Big, and look forward to any questions that you have. Thank you.
Oh, this is your poll.
Okay, do you want me to?
Yeah.
Sure. So we all gave questions, and mine was, when's the best time to consider net zero in a project?
Extra credit.
Extra credit.
Hopefully an
So
easy one.
At project initiation, during the scope definition by project owners, at the beginning of the design phase, during construction, let's just wing it. Maybe I'm giving you a judgment there. And after construction, retrofit the building, since the energy should pay for the upgrades. Very good.
We don't know how many of you are participating, but you're all right.
Well, there's not an option for all of the above.
After construction. We've got an after construction. All of the above, yes.
That's what I would have.
All of the above.
Should have put that in.
Never a time not to think about it, right?
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll turn it over to Shanti.
Yep. Thanks all for sticking around for the last session of the last day at Greenbuild 2018. I guess last time I was here was at Greenbuild in San Francisco, where I got to talk about this building, the design process. This is our own net zero office building at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory out in Golden, Colorado. I'm an energy efficiency and zero energy buildings researcher there. So this is my laboratory, if you will. I've got 1,300 office employees, guinea pigs for my research in this building. And so we learned a lot about the design process. We came to Greenbuild in San Francisco, however many years ago that was, and talked about how we got there in the design trade-offs. So now, we've got a new net zero building. You hand it over. How do you actually operate long-term at net zero is a lot of what we've been working on and understanding. Once you have a really aggressive LEED Platinum net zero building, can you actually operate it as design intended, right, long-term? So learned a lot over the last 4 years. We have been operating at net zero energy according to the DOE definition for net zero for the last 4 years now. The 2.4 megawatts of solar on our parking and on our rooftop there for that office building is necessary long-term for us. And we have a little bit of extra space if we ever needed to add more. Your strategy about being adaptive and adding more solar if needed to get to net zero if you can't get the efficiency right. So I think one of the key strategies that we have learned is this idea that there's this emerging role of zero energy building operators, someone that's ultimately responsible for saying yay or nay, is it net zero or not, right? And so there's a range of things that zero energy building operators are doing around benchmarking, finding faults, fixing them. It seems to be a continuous opportunity in all these buildings to making sure every time someone wants to plug something in, it's the most efficient option there is on the plug load side, and the procurement, making best friends with your data center manager goes a long way as a zero energy building operator to make sure that they're making the right choice on IT procurement through engaging 1,300 occupants and keeping them happy, productive government employees. And so through developing occupant-specific solutions that allow us to engage and create spaces for every occupant that they can take control of. And then coming to Greenbuild and telling the story about what you've done and how to do it. That's at a high level, the kinds of things we talk about, but in my mind every night, this is kind of what actually I think about rather than all that is, can we just turn it off at night? Is there something left on at night that, this is an office building, it's only occupied a third of the hours in the year, right? And the other 2/3 of the hours, there's lots of things that we don't turn off in buildings that really has a huge opportunity to get to net zero energy. Is it working as intended? Are our daylighting controls working? Are the occupancy sensors working, right? Thermostats, those are all simple things that anyone trying to think about benchmarking to net zero on an ongoing basis, spends time thinking about, and is it on track, right? So when if you're getting off track, how quickly can you figure that out? It's amazing how many of these meters that we all use to do this work is fail or never set up in the right in the first place, and so we spend a lot of time getting our data and our energy information systems up and running so that we can actually have confidence in that data. And then, you know how to use a light switch, right? It's amazing how much education I've had to do with our employees about up is on, down is off, right? It's a light switch, you can use it. And so we do have lots of light switches, and you are allowed to use them in our building. So training on light switches, as simple as that may sound, is something that you'd be prepared to do. And then lots of 400 plus operable windows that the occupants can use, and that's an ongoing challenge to keep all those windows managed. For those of you sitting in the back there, you can see that screen with the water. That's actually this same building here. So it's cool that we get to continue to contribute to the images there. And so it's not just us trying to get to net zero in one building. As a researcher, part of my job is to learn about high performance and net zero and then tell the world about it. And so one of the ways we do that is through our publications, things like Zero Energy, realizing high performance buildings, how to maintain energy efficient design intent during building operation, everything we're talking about. So lots of strategies and how others can do this from all, everything we've learned. See a link to that. That's me on USGBC's from 2014, the first year of net zero energy mission accomplished, right? But the reality is that's the first year you're starting the mission, right? This is back to when should you think about net zero energy? At that first year is really when you're starting to think about it, because it's a year-to-year continuous goal that really allows us to maintain our design intent long-term. But the most common question I get as an occupant and a zero energy building researcher is how much more did it cost? Right, and so we're really, we've heard a lot about cost, and seeing this scale is cost-effective solutions. And so wrote a publication here about cost control strategies for zero energy buildings that review the procurement lessons, the design modularity kind of cost trade-off approaches, and then some of the innovation we're seeing in the construction industry and things like prefabbing and modular design that allow us to build these high-performance buildings faster and quicker, which means saves money for things like LEED Platinum and Net Zero. So that's our own experience in one building, but we also contribute to the greater good here around zero energy for schools. And so I want to point out my colleague here, Paul Torslini, if you want to raise your hand, Paul. He was the chair of this recent design guide called Advanced Energy Design Guides for K through 12 schools. So if you followed this series from printed and developed by ASHRAE, AIA, USGBC, IES.
He's holding the design guide. He always takes it with him wherever
Paul's
he goes.
One of our principal researchers at NREL and chaired this committee funded by the Department of Energy to basically create solutions for every single climate zone across the United States, showing that net zero schools, new and major renovation can be done, should be done now. Pretty much every new school in this country should be net zero. Is basically what it comes down to, and our professional societies are contributing to these best practices, case studies, examples of how to do this nationwide, so that we can all get on the same page here and help our school district partners figure this out. And so find Paul after this, and if you ask him a good question or convince him that you need that hard copy, you can take that home. We got a couple extras there, so he'll dole that out for those that will actually use it. So find him after this. He's also chairing the next round of these guides. It's a small, medium offices. So the 90% peer review will come out here in December 1st. It'll be out open for 2 weeks. If you want to contribute to our understanding, your expertise and your understanding, I think we might get a good case study from your office building down in Florida. It's pretty difficult, so maybe we could leverage some of that in that. But so their 90% review draft will come out with the publication later on next year. And so for those of you that know the alternative compliance path for energy efficiency points, the 50% series of design guides have always been an option for you to use. So this is the next round of that same series around zero energy.
Shanti, how can people find that 90% and actually make comments on it? I think a lot of people in this room probably would have some good input.
Paul, you want to speak?
Give you a business card? Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be available on ASHRAE's website for sure, if you find that. And these are our free downloads as well. So if you want to actually, if you haven't downloaded it, you can go to ASHRAE's website and ashrae.org/AEDG, and you can actually download all the versions that are there and see the current peer reviews. So there was actually just a session before this one on this here. So one of the things we have learned about how to replicate this is put net zero into your design build contracts, right? We've learned a lot about how to contractually require things like LEED Platinum and net zero energy. And so for all of our capital construction, something we do now going forward based on our experience here is we put our energy requirements into our design build contracts for any time we have a new large scale building. So from laboratory to our parking garage to an office building to a cafeteria, it really changes the way these energy goals are considered, and then wrote a guide about how to do that, how-to guide for energy performance-based procurement. And so, yeah, the session right before this one at 8 o'clock was about this program. This is where a nonprofit, Seventh Wave, is trying to scale this approach to utility programs for 100 buildings over the course of 3 years to really understand how to replicate this process we've used. And locally here, you can get an extra incentive money through the new construction incentive programs here in Chicago with the ComEd Accelerate Performance Program and how that works.
All right. We wanted to leave a nice chunky bit of time here for folks to ask questions, share examples of your work, and so forth. So, Mike, here we go.
Do you want a couple more slides? Do you want
you do? I'm sorry.
Do you want to do those, or do you want to?
I would like you to do them.
Okay.
I would like you to do your presentation.
Okay. So, final point here.
Sorry.
We got 15 minutes. I'll get through this in a few minutes here.
No worry.
Looking forward, I think it's also helpful as kind of looking back about what we've all done right over the last 4 years. Probably, I think going forward, it's also helpful for you all to think about going in the future green builds and future work here. Is that to get approaching net zero energy to me means how many of us are all going to work in net zero office buildings, live in net zero homes in the next 10 years, and so. Looking at that, where we see this happening going forward, we definitely look to California and some of their large-scale commitments to this. One on the commercial side that is, to me, a big moment here is state of California requiring net zero energy for all the state-owned new construction buildings, from office towers in Sacramento to big laboratory buildings like this. This is in Riverside, California. This is CARB's new net zero energy vehicle testing facility, right? 3+ megawatts of solar and big heavy load laboratory, right? Multi-story lab in Riverside. And so because of that commitment, you start to see large-scale net zero high-load buildings like this. And so we see laboratories, we see hospitals now thinking about zero energy, and even going more vertical. Here's a great example of kind of where we're at in the zero energy buildings industry. It's not just low-rise or a couple stories of schools. It's a 6-story office building that just opened up last month in Silver Springs, Maryland. United Therapeutics, so their new corporate headquarters office building, right, where they're getting solar on everything, on the facade, on the parking, on the roof, right, to reach net zero under 20,000 BTUs per square foot per year goal, right? And for those of you who went to this session on, about this building, this is a net zero retrofit also in DC from American Geophysics Union, right? A great example of the bullet center of the East Coast, they call it, right, of a solar canopy necessary to get to net zero. All sorts of great innovation around full electrochromics and then sewer heat recovery and DC power. You did talk about, you did look at, high performance projects like this really showing the way where we can get more urban projects, more projects without a lot of land dedicated and still reach zero energy. So we're starting to see that happen more and more, get more mainstream projects, larger projects out there. Great.
Now
so
I
from
can
that,
jump
yeah,
in.
now
Interrupt.
I'm good. And we got 13 minutes left. Yeah. Great. Thanks,
Great.
Saul.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I just want to use the last few minutes here for questions, comments, stories. Marla, I'll run over to you first.
I'm sure we could probably spend an entire session on lessons learned, but I'm just curious if you have, any of you have at least like one kind of major lesson learned or takeaway that we could learn from your wisdom.
So one lesson learned that we found when we're designing a building to closely match the building loads is that through our building management system and our energy management systems, we have to really pay attention to those on a daily basis. Because all it takes is a couple of days where a inverter goes down, you have a couple strings down, well, now you've lost that net zero for that entire month, and really you've lost it for the entire year. So there is a plus to overproduction and maybe adding maybe 10 to 15% additional solar. Well, when you design very tightly, you have to be careful that you're on it every single day.
Yeah, I think I would add, certainly that's true. And then what you mentioned, Shanti, is to go back and really make sure in your commissioning that everything's working, that you're getting all your data and staying on top of it.
From my perspective, scaling these solutions is going to require a close coordination with our local utility partners. And every utility seems to be different. Even in Florida, it sounds like you've got to deal with different utilities in different parts of, from co-ops through large-scale utilities, and every utility has a different rate, and every utility has a different way to account for your renewables. And if we're using the grid to backfeed all of our excess to get to zero energy, that only can scale so large. And so I think going forward, understanding the interconnection agreements, the utility rates, and how utilities can be our partners in reaching these goals. And so to me, that's a key lesson learned going forward, is we'll have to do a really good job at understanding how and when we use energy and the way that we use our utility partners to scale this.
Great. We've got a question back here.
Hi, there seem to be many definitions of net zero, and I know NREL has one. Can you just talk a little bit about the definition and what do you think is best?
Good question. I guess I'll start with that. Holly presented some of the link to the DOE standard definition for zero energy. I think any of them are good. Any of them, pick one and use it is my usual response to that. And so, I think you don't want to muddle things with getting into the details of time-dependent valuation or site-to-source multipliers or, carbon multipliers that we all like to get into the weeds on. I think if you stay at a high level, communicate, zero energy conceptually as a building that produces more on-site renewable energy than it uses over the course of a year, you keep most of the outside world that's not in this room at the table, understanding what that means, and communicate to a CEO, or you can communicate it to your members, right, on your commitment. And then, so I know the definition matters, right, in terms of the details of how to implement it, but with the USGBC coming out with the new net zero certification to go along with your lead rating, I think that probably is a good place to start. And use the kind of industry momentum behind that. I haven't looked at the details just yet of how that's going to roll out, but I think that's a great way to do that. There's other net zero certification programs out there as well that go into all electric solutions and such. But yeah, that's my general thought.
Thanks. I want to just open this question up to the room as well. I know there are a lot of you working on zero energy projects. Anybody want to share a lesson learned from your experience? Not today. Okay. Next question over here.
So I'll take a minute to brag a little bit. That's actually my building you put up there, United Therapeutics.
There you go.
Just moved in about a month ago.
You coming back next year to talk about it?
If I'm invited, I'd love to.
Okay. We need the whole team.
We're very proud of it. We're very excited to kind of get through this last little phase. But the biggest lessons learned that we've got going on right now is just getting through that commissioning phase. There was so much work done up front, but as much as you can get done during the design, construction, validation phase, while it's getting built, and you move in, and there's so much left to do. So, I mean, we've probably got another month or so left of commissioning, 1,000-item long list. That's kind of the biggest thing from my experience that has been a bit of a headache at the end when you think you're right at the finish line, but you're not quite there.
You're just getting started. Yep.
Yeah.
In general, give it a year to sort all that out, and then you start the net zero kind of accounting process. Is how we've thought about it.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. That was really good. My name's Alicia Brown, and I work for Sandia National Labs. It's a really large DOE facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so my question's really more about policy. For Shanti and Holly, you might not have the answers, but Obama had an executive order to get us to net zero by 2025. I'm not sure if everybody in the audience knows that. It's pretty powerful. And then Trump revoked that executive order. So I guess my question would be, how do we start to shape and form policies that can stick, that go beyond executive orders? So when we're in planning, we're getting kind of whiplash trying to plan for something, and then there's no funding. And so we really need something with teeth. So I'm asking DOE really to have an ordinance or some sort of more long-standing requirements and how we might have it happen.
She's right behind you there.
When you take that one. Well, yeah. I think we do a lot of work on building codes, and that's a place where the individual jurisdictions can make those choices and supported by DOE, but can make those choices for themselves, and they do stick. So that's one place I would say. I don't know if other DOE and lab folks have opinions on that topic. Paul?
And before Paul gets to it, I will say that state level, the states that set their own energy codes are really showing the leadership here.
Yeah.
Everyone's excited for California's new net zero code, right, for residential and 3-story multifamily, right, so starting next year. So I think we all know how to do it. Now it's the time to scale it, and so you'll start to see large-scale local jurisdictions really move into that leadership space.
And where DOE's buildings or Sandia's buildings are in locations where those codes are set, that's what we have to do by law. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that applies to everyone in this room is one of the things that we're showing, and these projects showed it, NREL showed it with the RSF, so Paul Torsolini with NREL, is that we can do this, we can do it today. It doesn't need to cost extra money. And so one of the challenges that I put out to everybody in this audience, and we'll put Sandia in that, is as you're procuring buildings, just ask for them. And when people squawk and say, I can't do it for that price, find a different design team and contractor, right? That's how you can move the industry, because we have enough examples, especially now moving into K-12 and office, that it can happen. It can happen today without increasing the cost. And that's one of the big takeaways that we need to take. And the more case studies we have to show that, and talk to one of us about getting those case studies in circulation, the more people will do it, because it's the only way that makes sense.
Thanks, Paul. I would reiterate that, and I think we've heard it throughout this conference this week, of just ask. If you're a building owner, start asking for it. If you are a designer in this room, start offering it. If nobody offers it, you're not going to get this level of performance.
My name is Henry Okeke with Consumers Energy. Thanks for your presentation. 2 questions. The first one is, as buildings evolve, how do you ensure that it stays net zero? The functions of building evolve. What plans or what systems do you have in place to ensure that post-construction or post-occupancy that you stay at net zero? The second question is, all things considered, name one thing that you will do differently if you had to approach a net zero project from the beginning, one thing that you will do differently.
I think one of the biggest challenges in keeping buildings net zero is using the building management system, as I stated earlier, the energy management system, to continuously track those buildings. On our small 4,000 square foot branches, they run around 3,000 to 4,000 watts all day long. So that means at lunchtime, when someone turns on a 1,000 watt microwave, we see the spike in our building management system. Okay, so we have to be very observant of that. And there's no way that I can take away the microwaves or the coffee pots or the cookie makers. But we just have to be very attentive in our design to accommodate for that.
I think for us, it's really important to work with the building staff. We have frequent calls with the facilities engineer, who's really the boots on the ground and going around and making sure the different monitors are working, understanding where to tweak the systems. So it's an ongoing commitment to work with the building staff in a large building like ours.
Something else that we do, whenever we do a larger building, we make sure that our contractors for the solar sign a guaranteed production agreement. And that's making sure that when we have 7 different contractors all submitting bids, they're all using different software guaranteeing the overall annual production, that if they're saying that the system is going to do 500,000 kilowatt hours a year, they have to back it up. And we true up about every 2 years, where if they're not meeting that goal, then they're writing us a check.
Sure, happy to offer a few thoughts here.
Bakari was talking about, I can't take away the coffee pots and the cookie makers. There is an element, I know, at NREL of occupant participation and buy-in in the process. Speak to that.
Yeah, I think when you have a measured energy use requirement and everyone's committed to it, it changes the way you think about energy efficiency, I think, and that you start to really value simple, passive efficiency strategies that just work, that don't require someone to engage or check up on something that isn't working or not, right? And so therefore, things like triple pane glass with fiberglass window frames. Those will work for 25 years, and I don't have to check on it all the time, right? I'll invest in that over a sophisticated daylighting control system. For the same amount of energy savings, which one will we all pick, right? And so I think we've started to think about how to value, the reality of the savings of different efficiency strategies once we have this, commitment to it. So that's one thing I think that we would do differently, is actually put in fiberglass window frames in a commercial building and really figure out how to make that happen rather than the standard thermally broken aluminum frames that we all seem to be stuck with in the commercial world. And that goes along with giving occupants control over their space, whether it's glare control or giving them light switches. Does everyone have light switches in their office, right? Or are you expecting the lighting control system to control the lights for you? And so we take that pretty far in terms of task cooling. USB-powered task fans everyone gets on their desk that they control your outlets. You can control your window, right? Operate your window. And so giving occupants control over their space goes a long way. You just got to design in some automatic return vacancy sensors or timers that bring things back to the standby mode. has been our strategy in engaging the 1,300 people in our office building.
All right, I think we are at time. I'm not mistaken. So please encourage you to stick around and talk to our panelists afterwards. Thank you all so much for being here and participating.
Great. Thank you.
Thank